Will Tony Pollard and Bijan Robinson stop disappointing their fantasy managers in Week 10? And how about Jonathan Taylor now coming on as an every week play? It's time to break down our running back and quarterback rankings for Week 10 as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. I'm one of your co-hosts here on Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player league. Your team every day, your fantasy team every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst on NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, we will be breaking down our running back and quarterback rankings here for Week 10. And interesting that we have some major people on bye this week. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce with the Chiefs. The Dolphins assets are not there, so no Tua, no Raheem Mostert to Philadelphia off. So that's also a lot of fancy assets with Jalen Hurts and DeAndre Swift for our purposes today. So a lot of players that you might be having to stretch and play that you normally wouldn't, and some guys that might be higher in the rankings. We'll get into those rankings here. Spend a little bit more time on running backs than quarterbacks here. But I have to tell you, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download a Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Michelle, let's dive right in here. And yes, I have an interesting player at number 2. He's disappointing all year as an RB1, but I have Tony Pollard all the way at number 2. Last time it didn't work out because they blew out the Giants all the way back in Week 1, and there was not a lot of fantasy points to have for the offense because the special teams and defense did all the damage. But look, the Giants are giving. They got burned by Josh Jacobs last week. You have him pretty high at number 8, but I'm just maybe willing this to happen with Tony Pollard. It needs to happen. He needs to have a 2-touchdown, like 150-yard game. The game script should be positive at 16 points. Will it happen, Michelle?
So the last time he has scored a touchdown, the last time he's gotten into the end zone as a receiver or a rusher was in Week 1 against the Giants. It started so strong. 2 touchdowns for Tony Pollard in Week 1 against the Giants. Since then, it's just gone down and down and down and down. I mean, 4 of the last 5 weeks, he hasn't even hit 10 fantasy points in full PPR leagues. It's been really, really bad for him. And the Cowboys offense has been clicking. So there have been scoring opportunities, but they're just all going to Dak. I still am trusting in him this week. It's hard not to because the offense is good. He's like on the field all the time. So I still have him at 8. 2 is bold. I'll say that. Obviously, we both have Christian McCaffrey number 1. He stays there at all times unless he's on bye. But yeah, 2 is up there. I don't know if I'm that confident in him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going based on volume in this matchup, and let's hope. And Josh Jacobs gives me some inspiration from last week. Now, a guy that now is back to his old tricks here as an elite fantasy football asset. He's now that takeover has kind of happened for the Colts. He's still getting the majority of the touches here. Jonathan Taylor, I have him at number 6. You have him at number 9. He's looking like the guy that you want every single week. It's kind of like Alvin Kamara. You had to wait for him to come back a little bit longer, but he's produced. Same thing with Kamara after the 3-game suspension. These guys both lining up as league winners here. And there's nothing that scary about the Patriots' run defense.
Yeah, no, you think Patriots and you think, oh, that's a scary matchup. They're allowing the 13th most fantasy points per game to running backs this year. So still a favorable matchup for running backs. And yeah, I mean, Zach Moss, it was fun while it lasted. I love me some Zach Moss, and it was great when he got the volume. But Jonathan Taylor was all the way up to 74% of offensive snaps last week. He didn't do what we wanted him to do against the Panthers, right? 18 carries for only 47 rushing yards. That's not good, especially against that Panthers defense. But he got the receiving touchdown. He got the receiving work. It does seem like every other week they switch it up with who gets the touchdowns. So we'll see if the touchdown goes to Moss this week. But I have Jonathan Taylor ranked high. I'm going to keep him there. His usage is now back. So we know how talented he is. And he just needed those snaps back, and he got them back.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, you're just feeling good about him if you have him here down the stretch going forward. And the Colts offense, I mean, going to maybe revolve more around him with some injuries at wide receiver they have to worry about. Now, I think it's the obligatory reference that we have to make in every show until he gets going is Bijan Robinson. I mean, we talked a lot about him yesterday as a guy that you should trade for. It is the Cardinals this week. I think this could be a sneaky, high-scoring game. Taylor Heineke is there. The Cardinals' defense stinks. You have the Falcons' defense really reeling, and Kyler Murray's on the other side. That's what we need a little bit. We need the Falcons to be challenged and pushed and maybe even trailing in this game, which is possible with Kyler Murray back. So that's all good news. Bijan Robinson, you look at some of the people that have crushed this matchup, including Gus Edwards. You had Kareem Hunt do the damage last week. So some lesser backs are doing it that don't have the same complete skill set. So you think Robinson, this should be it. I mean, I have him at RB10. You have him at RB6. We're just hoping again. I think he blows up.
Yeah, I mean, this again, if you didn't listen to yesterday's episode, I was on the trade for Bijan Robinson train. It's not that I have any trust in Arthur Smith. I don't. But when you look at the production between Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier and every part of it, not just like the box score stats, but every advanced metric, there is no coach in the NFL that should be making the decision that Tyler Algier should be getting more touches or the same amount of touches as Bijan Robinson. So I'm just hoping that an NFL coach opens his eyes, right? And I just believe in this matchup, the Cardinals are allowing the third most fantasy points per game to running backs this year. If Arthur Smith does not feed Bijan Robinson in this matchup, then I hope they lose and I hope he gets fired. And I know it's not good karma to hope for somebody to get fired, but at the same time, you can't be this naive. I can't even talk about Bijan Robinson without getting upset. So let's move on to another guy that I was shocked by your rankings when I saw it. Rhamondre Stevenson, you have him all the way at running back 9. I have him at running back 21. So I'm still saying he's an RB2 this week. But you are super confident in him. He's only had, over his last 5 games, these are his carry counts, 8, 10, 9, 10, 9. So not getting a lot of work. He broke off a super long touchdown last week. That was pretty much the majority of his fantasy points. But you are feeling good against him, against the Colts this week.
Yeah, a couple things are happening here. I mean, the Patriots passing game doesn't have a lot of options. Is Demario Douglas, Juju Smith-Schuster, and the tight ends pretty much. So he's going to be involved there, right? We know that's going to be the case. He's not going to be game scripted out. He's going to be involved there in the passing game. And now you see Stevenson scoring and being a little bit more explosive. And I think this is just more just looking at him. I think he was a little bit slow and just a little bit out of shape maybe early in the season. But now I think this is the Rhamondre Stevenson we thought could emerge in this offense. So I do like the fact that he can break off those long runs now. That's why he didn't have to carry too much because he's explosive. And I look at this matchup against the Colts. I mean, look, they can give up the long runs to some guys, and they've done that here a lot. Remember, Jerome Ford, I think, went the distance. So they can give it up to these explosive backs that have speed. So, and I also look at some of the pool that we have this week. There's not a lot of guys that are guaranteed to touch the ball a lot, and he's definitely separated a little bit from Ezekiel Elliott in terms of being the dynamic back they want to give the most touches to.
If Rhamondre Stevenson scores more points than Bijan Robinson this week, I will quit fantasy football. I just have to quit at that point because, just 2 totally different talents. But in a full
just
PPR
league,
league,
it was on the Patriots, though, right? Just imagine Bijan on the Patriots; he would be killing it every week. So sometimes it's the coaching, and that's what it comes down to, I guess. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think it took a while for Stevenson to get there, but yeah, it's just volume.
In a full PPR league, because we do half PPR rankings. So in half PPR, I have Stevenson at 21. In full PPR, I would push him up a 3 or 4 spots there. So I still think he's a very playable asset this week, just not as high on him as you. I do think there's a huge discussion here to be had about the Lions backfield, right? David Montgomery is back at practice. It looks like he's going to play this week. And prior to David Montgomery getting that rib injury, Jahmyr Gibbs was not getting the workload. Then Montgomery goes out. Gibbs balls out, is showing his talent. Now what happens with Montgomery back? Does Gibbs still get a decent amount of work, and can you trust them both in fantasy? I have Gibbs ranked as my RB14 and then David Montgomery as RB15. So back to back. You have Montgomery at RB14 and Gibbs down at 20. So a little bit further down than me. How are you feeling about these two in this matchup against the Chargers?
Well, the Chargers by the numbers have been very good against the run, but I think it's a little bit of a fluke because the Chargers are built to be a good pass defense, right? Their pass defense has been bad because they're not good on the back end. But if they can get the pressure like they did with Joey Bosa on Monday night, then things are going to contain. But the problem is they're not going to get the pressure in this game. I think you look at the Lions' offensive line, they can blow the Chargers' front off, I think, with the ability to just kind of overpower them a little bit. So I like the Lions. This is the right usage, right? I think this is what you want out of the Falcons, where they can incorporate both of their backs in the right way. I mean, I don't want Tyler Algier to have this, but I think Montgomery and Gibbs can coexist and be productive. And look, it's going to come down to the game script. If they pull ahead, it's going to help both of these guys produce. I think if it stays even, then you see decent games from both, but nobody blows up. If it goes into a situation where the Lions just destroy the Chargers, then it's going to favor David Montgomery. So
Yeah.
I think you have a nice floor for both based on their usage. Again, it's just going to depend a little. This one's a hard game to predict, right? I mean, it's on the road. And again, the Lions, you figure, will be playing well coming off a bye. I do like the Lions to win this game. So that's why I like Montgomery a little bit more than Gibbs. But I think both these guys are viable. You just have to drop Montgomery down to an RB2 and look at Jahmyr Gibbs as an RB2.
Yeah, so I still feel good about Gibbs. This is a whole other situation with coaches just need to look into who's actually the more productive player. I mean, Gibbs is averaging 5.3 yards per carry this year, 6.2 and 5.9 yards per carry in his 2 games as a starter this last 2 weeks. Montgomery's averaging just at 4.1. One single game with an average of 4.2 or better. Like, he's just a guy that scores a lot of touchdowns, right? So he'll probably get the touchdowns, but hopefully Gibbs will get all the receiving work. The Chargers are allowing the second most receiving yards to running backs this year. I like both this week. Montgomery's going to have to get in the end zone to have much production, but I still am trusting Gibbs even with Montgomery back. We're going to get into our lower level RB2s this week, RB3s, some flex plays, what to do with Rashad White now that he had that huge breakout game last week. But first, I want to talk about one of our awesome sponsors, Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. I'm telling you guys, I use this app all the time. It is my first go-to when I'm looking to purchase tickets for any game, and I always do it at the last moment. Great deal, so easy to use. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, all you have to do is create an account on the Game Time app and redeem code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Vinny, your boy, Rachaad White, has a good game. He scores 2 touchdowns. Now, I will say I have him ranked as RB16 this week. You have him ranked as RB13. The more I think about it, I think I'm too high on him. Like, I get he had 2 touchdowns last week, but his rushing efficiency is still just so garbage. 20 carries for 73 rushing yards. I mean, that's terrible. He is being involved as the receiver, so I got to keep him up there a little bit. But those 2 touchdowns were his first time getting into the end zone since week 2. I do like him because he's getting so much volume and he's on the field a ton, 80% of the time. But I don't know if I can keep him all the way at RB16. You have him at 13. You're super confident in him this week.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, he's dominating the backfield. I mean, look at the percentage of his opportunities. They just blow everyone out of the water on his team. Like, he's the guy getting massive volume. And you saw the Titans' run defense used to be impenetrable early, but you saw a similar back, Jalen Warren, have some success in the passing game. Najee Harris was also very effective here. This game's at home. You figured it's going to be a positive game script. So he doesn't need to be an efficient runner, right? He just needs an opportunity near the goal line and be involved in the passing game. I think that's his role. That's why I like it. So in half and full PPR, I think he has a little bit more value because you're always going to get that in the passing game. But again, he's coming up with more standard value. So I like to see that. I think he's very similar to the next guy that we're kind of in the teens with borderline, kind of the middle of the range, I should say, RB2, Javonte Williams. He played really well the previous game before they had the bye, and we saw the full health version. There weren't other guys either. He was dominating again. No Jaleel McLaughlin, no Samaj P. Ryan. These guys have disappeared. The Bills have given up more to the running backs. Joe Mixon had a nice game against them as well. So Javonte Williams, I think, is also kind of a guy right now, like in that 0 RB range where you went after some guys. If they're getting volume, you got to play them. And I think he can have a pretty nice combined game. I also like the fact, just like White, he's involved in the passing game.
Yeah. So with Javonte Williams, he has not scored a rushing touchdown all year, has had one receiving touchdown that came in last week. But I mean, if you're 27 carries last game, if you're telling me he's going to get this kind of volume, he doesn't have to split the backfield with the other two guys, like you said, then I'm okay starting him as that lower end RB2. And that's exactly where we have him, right? I have him at RB19. You have him a couple spots higher at 17. But like you said, the Bills defense is just so banged up right now that they're not what they used to be, allowing the 5th highest yards per carry to running backs this year as well. So I think Javonte Williams is a very viable play this week. He's a volume play, right? And maybe hopefully he can score his first rushing touchdown of the season. Another guy who has not scored a rushing touchdown this season, driving me crazy, Alexander Mattison. We have him ranked pretty much exactly the same. I have him at RB20. You have him at RB21. Against the Saints, which is definitely not an easy matchup for running backs, but that's because they don't allow like any rushing touchdowns, right? But that doesn't matter because Madison doesn't score rushing touchdowns anyways. The Saints are middle of the pack in yards per carry allowed to running backs, ranked 16th, 4.1 yards per carry. So not the scariest there. And now without Cam Akers, I'm not excited to put him into my lineup. Don't get me confused, but he still is a guy you can plug in and hopefully get 12 points from him.
Yeah, and they have that one play they designed for him, it seems like, in the red zone to catch a touchdown, right? It's like a little bit of a pop pass kind of thing. It's funny because they don't use their receivers as well in the red zone. I mean, TJ Hawkinson's kind of a seam guy. He can come through the red zone, but they don't kind of have that Adam Thielen type, right? That you can just throw to in the red zone and you feel great about. I mean, Jordan Addison is not maybe built that way. So Madison has kind of become a key red zone receiver for them, and that's kind of really helped his value. So, and Cam Akers, again, going down, I mean, it was looking bleak for Madison. I mean, Akers scored that rushing touchdown, but then he got hurt last week. Madison has his backfield again. Ty Chandler is not going to challenge him here. So, interesting development there back in the favor of Alexander Mattison. So 3 guys that have been polarizing a little bit, White, Williams, Madison, all very good plays this week. Now, the matchup says, based on the running back points allowed, that James Cook should be in a smash spot this week against the Broncos. But he's James Cook, and the Bills don't know how to use him. We don't know about Leonard Fournette. We don't know about any other backs that they could use. Josh Allen is still being their leading rusher. They can forget about James Cook. So I just can't trust this guy anymore. Like, he's just not exciting to play, right? You're just hoping that somehow he gets a touchdown. But I also think his role in the passing game, remember, we could count on that. That's kind of gone away a little bit because you're showing shorter passes to Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir. They're involving these guys now. So the things that you could count on with James Cook, just not there. Maybe this guy is just not very good because they don't trust him because of his frail frame near the goal line.
Yeah, Latavius Murray just seems to be getting more and more work too, even inside the 20s where that was like where James Cook was getting it and then Murray wasn't coming in until the goal line. But now Leonard Fournette, we'll see if he gets brought up from the practice squad. Maybe he's active. Yeah, I have an RB23 because of the matchup. You have him at RB29. I'm definitely not excited to plug him in, but also like the Broncos aren't as bad of a matchup as it seems because of the points per game allowed. But like that Dolphins game is going to keep them up as the worst rush defense in the league, like all year, just because they allowed so They allowed 70 points in that game, and so many of those touchdowns went to the running back. So that's going to affect things all year long. They have been a much better defense overall, and especially against the run. Like, teams aren't just destroying them anymore. So, yeah, I don't love this James Cook, but he could always break off a long play. And the guys behind him, I'm not thrilled about either. So that's why I have him at 23. I totally get your RB29 ranking, though, for him. And then with Gus Edwards, what do we do with him? Because he has scored five rushing touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. But last game, he only had 5 carries. He only played 18% of the snaps. Now, I know they were killing the Seahawks pretty early on, but like, he's not going to just keep scoring this amount of touchdowns, right? So I don't have him ranked very high. I have him at RB28. You have him up at RB22, but against the Browns, don't love this matchup for him.
Yeah, Gus Edwards is kind of like Taysom Hill right now in the backfield. Just roll with it. Just go with it until you see any signs of this not happening. I mean, what I liked a couple weeks ago, he had that big reception, right? I didn't think that was even his skill set to have an explosive run. So or to run after the catch. So look, Gus Edwards, I mean, this team is killing it, right? I mean, that's the one thing I'm going to say is that the Ravens, I mean, when you look at defense and a running back stack, if you played him in DFS for the last few weeks, I mean, he's just destroying it. The Ravens defense is going to put them in very good positions here to finish drives. And I think what's also happening is Lamar Jackson has kind of been a setup man, right? They're getting some good production of the passing game. They're involving different people. So this offense is moving it, getting in position in the red zone. So look, as long as that's happening, Gus Edwards is going to find his way into the end zone. So just roll with it. I mean, I think that's what the answer is. And yeah, you're not going to just go to Keaton Mitchell. This guy only had a handful of touches as well. So look, he's the guy until further notice. I mean, you could do a lot worse for an RB2 this week.
Yeah, I do think this game is going to be super low scoring between the Browns and the Ravens, both great defenses right now. I don't think there's going to be too many scoring opportunities, but yeah, I mean, Gus Edwards is just scoring too much to probably sit him, but it very much is going to be, he either gets a touchdown, he does all right for you, or he doesn't. And I think he's going to completely just like get 3 or 4 points and stink in your lineup.
Yeah, that's exactly, what you have to expect here. So yeah, well, hopefully there'll be some things we can talk about positively about the Ravens passing game in our final segment as we break down Lamar Jackson, where he's in the rankings after a couple disappointing weeks, thanks to that defense and running game dominating. But before we do that, we got to hear from another one of our fine sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by DoorDash. And really, we're sitting there locked into watching games all Sunday afternoon. We don't have time to go out and get ourselves something, whether we're going and needing groceries or some takeout. But look, it's just an all-day affair, right? If you're watching the Red Zone channel, you can't really just leave. You got to just switch your jerseys and just settle into your couch and let someone else take care of all that. And DoorDash is there for you. Pizza, wings, if you want the traditional stuff, they'll come to you there. You can get just burgers and buns from the grocery store as well. Chips, dips, those are also very popular on game day. Get those veggie platters in. So all that kind of stuff, DoorDash can deliver to you at kickoff or in the middle of games at halftime and get into breaks there that you might want to have your favorite snacks on hand. Well, DoorDash is going to help you get prepared before, during, and after game day. It's easy to get in on DoorDash. Just go to the DoorDash app, and now you'll get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app. You just enter the promo code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23. Check it out. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKED23. Subject to change. Terms do apply. Again, check it out. Lock23 to get $10 value on your first order, up to $15 or more with the DoorDash app. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue and to close the show as we look at our quarterback rankings and what stands out there. Now, Lamar Jackson, by default, with some guys off this week, including Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and Tua Tagovailoa, as we mentioned. You can't go too far low, right? You have him at number 3. I have him at number 4. I think this is a bounce back game. What he does well is tend to play well against division opponents, especially the Browns. A nice game against them. First time we talked about that. And this game's at home. So I think, look, the fact that the Browns defense is a little tougher actually helps Lamar's chances because I think he improvs a little bit, runs, and that's where we're looking for the points.
Yeah, and I did say I do think this is going to be a lower scoring game, but at the same time, Lamar is still going to figure out how to get points up on this board, and it's not his fault that he's been putting up no points for fantasy over the last couple weeks. Like the offense has been rolling, he's been getting them in scoring opportunities. It's just Gus Edwards is stealing all of them, right? So I think Lamar Jackson will be just fine. And like you said, there's so many guys on bye that it's hard to put Lamar any lower than that. We both have Josh Allen at number 1, Joe Burrow at number 2. Then I have Lamar and then Justin Herbert. You have Justin Herbert, then Lamar. So both super high on those guys. Then we have Dak Prescott at number 5. But where it gets interesting is you have CJ Stroud, who just broke out last week, at number 6. I am not nearly as high on him. I have at quarterback 11 against the Bengals. Tell me why you feel so confident in him having another huge week this week.
Well, I think this could come in a different way. I don't think it's going to be an epic comeback to beat Joe Burrow, but I think this could be a little bit of a sloppy game where you actually could see his interception total go up, take a few sacks, but I could see him put up 302 in this one. I mean, I just think based on having Joe Burrow on the other side, I think the Bengals are playing lights out right now on both sides. I get it. And this is a little bit scary for that reason, right? It's a little volatile. It's not safe, but last week didn't feel all that safe either. And he came through. So look, yeah, it's going to be a little sloppier this week. I still think he can retain top 12 value, and that's where you have him too at QB 11. So, look, we're pretty close on him. I just high on him just based on what he did last week and the way he's playing right now. And just, again, I think he's going to have to throw 50 times in this game.
Yeah, I'm not nearly as confident. Like we've seen guys have huge weeks and then come crashing down. I don't think he's going to do nearly as good on the road because he hasn't, right? Played 4 games at home, 4 games on the road, averaging 25 points per game in fantasy at home, only 14 and a half on the road. Bengals have allowed just 9 passing touchdowns all year. I'm not feeling it in this matchup. If I don't have to play him, I don't want to. But I do have him at quarterback 11, so I'm still saying he is a viable option. I just don't think it's going to be a great week for him. Now, Justin Fields is coming. Well, we'll see if he's coming back. He's been limited practice. They have to play on Thursday Night Football, so keep an eye on that. But we're both saying if he's back, play him, right? I am at quarterback 7.
Absolutely.
You have him at quarterback 8. He was killing it before his injury. He just has too much upside to ignore. So if he's back, you put him back into your lineup. But I am much higher on this guy than you are. It's Baker Mayfield against the Titans. I have him at quarterback 8. You have him at quarterback 14. Titans are right in the middle of the pack of fantasy points per game allowed to the quarterbacks. Plus, they just traded away their best secondary player. Look, Baker's kind of doing his thing. He's been consistent over the last handful of weeks. It's like Rashad White took 2 touchdowns away from him last week, and he still put up nearly 20 points. So I just think they're going to have to throw in this matchup, and Baker Mayfield's getting it done with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Kate Otten and Rachaad White through the air. So I like him in this matchup.
Yeah, I do like him. I just don't think he has a really high ceiling just because it's the Titans on the other side. I don't know how much he'll have to throw. I think the Buccaneers defense will have a little bit of a get well game here. I mean, they were terrible last week, so they can't get much worse, but I just look at this as a pretty good matchup for the Bucs at home because they can slow down Derrick Henry, put Will Levis in some uncomfortable situations here. So I do think Baker's fine. I think I would start him. I mean, I would consider him in 12-team leagues. There's a chance you have 2 of these guys on your team that you're looking at in that position. So in some leagues, Baker Mayfield should be available as the top streamer here. So I do like him for sure. And I think he's a guy that should be rostered as a backup in every league at this point because he's just so consistent. He said he's a good floor play to have on your bench.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we just talked about Justin Fields coming back. We have another quarterback coming back off of a bit more serious of an injury, right? Kyler Murray coming back for the first time since week 14 of last year, coming off that ACL injury. We both have him at quarterback 9, his very first game back against the Falcons. Now, this ranking has a lot to do with the 4 quarterbacks on bye. Well, 3 on bye, and then Matthew Stafford injured and on bye. But the Falcons are allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this year. I just feel like Kyler Murray, we know he can get it done with his arms and his legs. We'll see how much he runs right off the bat, but I'm okay playing him right away.
Yeah, I mean, he might be on the phone with Josh Dobbs, right? He'll be like, "Hey, Josh, how did you put up some numbers against this defense last week?" And maybe they still talk, right? And he said, "Oh yeah, run, take off and run here." That's how I put up a lot of numbers in this game. And the Falcons secondary, look, they have AJ Terrell, but he's not necessarily the biggest shutdown guy. I think we've also seen that the Falcons defense does not fare well when curveballs are thrown at them, where things are kind of all over the place. Like you saw that, right? I mean, Will Levis started; they didn't know what to do. Then they had Jaron Hall was playing, and then he got out, and then Josh Dobbs is there. Now Kyler Murray throws a curveball because you don't know what you're going to get, right? They have no idea like what you're going to get from Kyler Murray in his first start. This is not good for the Falcons. Again, maybe things are trending towards the Falcons needing to make some coaching changes here because their defense is starting to fall apart. Their offense needs to get better. Yeah, I like Kyler Murray. Just plug and play him. I mean, stop. I mean, you've been
Who
waiting
would you
for
rather
him.
play this week, Fields or Kyler Murray? Who do you feel more confident in?
I play Fields only because the Panthers defense is just, I don't know. They're finding guys off the street to play now. So that's my only thing is I think the Falcons at least have some healthy bodies where the Panthers don't have anybody anymore. It's pretty bad. So that's the only reason I do like him more. I mean, I think Fields can also have a bigger day passing than Murray. So I think that's where I go.
We have a big game against the Jaguars versus the 49ers this week. It's in Jacksonville. Who do you think will have the better fantasy game, Trevor Lawrence or Brock Purdy? Both defenses are – the 49ers defense was so good, and then they've fallen apart. Did they get it together in the bye week? We'll find out. Jaguars defense has really stepped up lately, like looking really good. So who are you feeling better about in this matchup?
Yeah, it's really tough here. I think I would feel a little bit better about Lawrence, and that's how I have them ranked 10, 11 here. And you have them actually similarly ranked back to back at 13 and 14, a little bit lower than I do, but I actually have to make this decision. Believe it or not, these are two of my quarterbacks in a 10-team league. So I have to decide between these two. I'm probably going to agonize over, but I'd probably go based on the matchup, based on how much you're going to have to throw in this game. I think I go with the Jaguars because I look at Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk. They both have good matchups this week when you look at the secondary. And this pass rush, really, it's very interesting. Neither team has a great pass rush. They have some good corners, but they still give it up, right? They can still give it up on both sides here. So I'm not afraid of like Javarius Ward or Lenoir and these guys that are out there for the 49ers. Like, no, I mean, I'm not too afraid of those guys, but I think the 49ers also could get McCaffrey going, right? I mean, the Jaguars' run defense is good, but if I'm also say who's going to go into a negative game script and potentially lose the game, then I'm feeling the Jaguars too, right? However you look at it, it comes to the Jaguars for me. So slightly better. I am hoping this game with Deebo Samuel potentially being back, with Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Ridley and Kirk and Evan Ingram, I hope this just goes nuts. I need a lot of points from this game. I need like a 38-35 game. That's what I really want. I don't know if we'll get it, but I think I'm pretty confident it'll be in the mid-20s for both teams.
Yeah, I have to keep staying off the Trevor Lawrence train. He has not finished inside the top 10 of fantasy points at the quarterback position in a week yet this season, which is absolutely insane when you consider Desmond Ridder has finished inside the top 10 three times, and Trevor Lawrence has not done it once.
Correct itself. Come on.
Lawrence has finished as a quarterback 16 or worse than 50% of weeks played this year.
He's a second half post by QB.
No, he has no upside. So if I had to choose between the two, I'm going with Purdy because at least he has two finishes inside the top 10. It hasn't been very pretty for him either, but at least one finish as a top 5 quarterback this year. Like at least you've seen some ceiling, some relevance of a ceiling.
I just want both to go off. Just can we get both to go off, and then I won't feel bad. So I won't make the wrong decision. Like I want both of them to have exactly 303, and I'll take it.
Yeah, well, Trevor Lawrence is never going to get 3, so that just doesn't happen for him. I will say there's a guy I'd rather play over both, and it might be shocking, but I'd rather go with Josh Dobbs over both Trevor Lawrence, and Purdy. Now, I have Dobbs at quarterback 12, so I'm not saying you have to play him. But if I was deciding between these three guys, I think I would go with Dobbs. He does have 4 finishes inside the top 10 this year, including each of the last 2 weeks, quarterback 3 last week, and he just joined the team last week. And the Saints defense is pretty solid overall, but like, I think on the road in Minnesota, they're not that scary of a defense. I know they made Tyler Badgett like turn over the ball a ton last week, but he also was making pretty big plays too. Like it was like either a big play or a turnover. Really, Badgett there was no middle ground for him. Dobbs, he's safer with the ball than that. So I like Dobbs. We know he's going to rush, use his legs, and he has good weapons. I hope KJ Osborne will keep an eye on him. But yeah, I would rather go with Dobbs over both Trevor Lawrence and Purdy this week.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I would think about it. I mean, where I had him in the rankings initially was 17, but I moved him a couple spots higher into actually a start position in deeper leagues because we know we're a little bit depleted here at quarterback. So, yeah, I could see Dobbs having value. And keep in mind, he is a QB1 based on the scoring this season. I mean, he's in the top 12. So let's hope he keeps that up. And I think this maybe a guy that you can go after on the cheap as well ahead of Justin Jefferson returning because I think he'll have almost every week value with Justin Jefferson back. So I think that's the only reason I'm down with Osborne hurt, maybe Jefferson not playing. But if Jefferson was playing, I would easily have him in the top 12. So something to keep in mind. He can put up some nice numbers this week. So that does it. I mean, we covered a lot of ground here. We're going through all our quarterbacks here. We will go into our wide receivers and tight ends on the next show here as we break down those rankings there for you. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Once again, we're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.